reading from John chapter 6, verses 1 to 15. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Well, here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. The word of the Lord.
We've all heard the saying, less is more. And with God, that saying is very true. God can make something out of nothing. Remember that in creation, the earth was formless and empty. And God made the universe out of a formless and empty lump. God spoke things into being. He made the sky, the earth, the water, and creatures to fill it. So now, refocusing ourselves on the passage that was just read. Large crowds had formed, and a lot of them were following Jesus because he was healing people, he was doing miracles, and they were pretty attracted and curious as to what he was doing. Most likely he was also teaching. And so all of these crowds are following Jesus around. The crowd that day is believed to be about 5,000 men. 5,000 men. This means that women and children were not counted. Some theologians think that if women and children would have been counted, the crowd could have been around 15 to 20,000 people. Jesus knew human need. He knew that they had been following him around quite a bit all day. People were tired. At this point, it says that they were in a field where there was a lot of grass and people were able to sit down. And Jesus knew that they were getting hungry. He didn't have to feed everyone, but he's kind and considerate. So he thought, how can we feed everyone who is here? The disciples thought, why don't they just go out on their own? Let them go out into the village, get their own lunch, Jesus. Let them do it themselves. But Jesus always goes the extra mile, and he thinks about their needs, and he thinks about how he can fulfill their needs. Even though he didn't need to, he's just so generous that way. So Jesus decides to make lunch for them. Jesus was thinking supernaturally, and the disciples were thinking naturally. Philip was very analytical and thought about all the costs. How much is it going to be exactly if we were to feed 15 to 20,000 people? We don't have that kind of money. But all things belong to Jesus, whether they exist or not. So along comes this little boy with his Lunchables. Maybe he was selling fish and bread, or maybe he had been following Jesus all day with his family and they had come prepared. And he goes around to where the disciples and Jesus are, and they notice he has 5 loaves, 2 fish. God used what this little boy had. Jesus prayed for it, and it multiplied. And it was more than enough to feed everyone who was there. There were even baskets left over of so much that was created from Jesus' prayer and words. What can we learn from this? That God makes something out of nothing. Do you think you have nothing to bring to God? As a little girl, I'd often look at athletic people, artistic people, musical people, and I'd see how talented they were, and I'd think, I don't have any of that. I have nothing to bring. And I had a really low concept of myself because of that. I thought I had nothing to offer. But God often makes something out of nothing. Do you ever feel like you have nothing to bring to God, nothing to bring to society? You do. God can make something out of nothing. Just bring Him your heart, be yourself, bring Him your sincerity. He can work through you. After all, God makes something out of nothing. Praise be to His name.